Uncle Bill, there were a couple of the Halloween movies that we had evidently never reviewed on the show, ever. I went back in the archive. We're putting all of these reviews up this Halloween season. And for some reason, this baffles me because I'm thinking we definitely reviewed this at some point, but no, evidently not. And that is the producer's cut. Not that we've reviewed the theatrical version probably half a dozen times, but we have never looked at this producer's cut that was Halloween. Technically, it was originally going to be called Halloween 666: The Origins of Michael Myers. Now, the story behind this is like so many movies back in the day, they did one of those test screenings. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was a teaser trailer that was released with that title, Halloween 666, the Origin of Michael Myers, or whatever.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even out there. It may have been released on video or something like that, on those video previews they did back in the day. So, I mean, this was one that the producer's cut was under many different names. Was one of the early bootleg DVD. It was like the sought after thing that you would get at conventions if you'd see somebody with it for a long time. And they finally released it with this Halloween box set and released it individually. So the producer's cut essentially was changed just due to the fact where it was like the Thorn thing was kind of stupid ultimately. And the producer's cut basically focused more on the curse of Thorn and the fact that Michael Myers was being controlled by the moon, the stars, and this cult.
Yeah, even when you talk about it, it's like, ah, God.
And the thing is too is like they would show flashbacks from they would have a flashback scene that would have Danielle Harris in it, and they would go through like the rape scene with Jamie and Michael a little bit in the producer's cut. And Jamie Lloyd, the Jamie character, is replaced, like the actress is replaced by J.C. Brandy was the actress's name. And there's a whole big story about Danielle Harris was on board to do this movie, but they were going to pay her scale, and they said, hey, you don't matter in this, you're just barely in the movie. And she got pissed off and was like, I'm not doing it. Screw you guys, I'm going home. But ultimately, though, like, if you're looking at the script and it's that producer's cut, if I was Danielle Harris, I wouldn't want to do it either. I mean, that would just be me, just by looking at the script of it. A lot of people kind of prefer the producer's cut. The big differences with the producer's cut is Jamie Lloyd is in it a little bit more. Instead of originally getting, like, what did she get in the theatrical version, like destroyed by some sort of farm equipment type thing that sawed the shit out of her or whatever.
Yeah, it's within like the first 10 minutes of the movie, I think.
Yeah, so in this one, she ends up living like a day or two later than that, and gets killed in a hospital, gets shot in the head in the hospital or whatever. And honestly, like, to me, I think the producer's cut was the original cut of the movie, but to me it makes less sense than the theatrical version. Like, a lot of people say the opposite.
Well, see, we've never reviewed that movie, but we have talked about it on the show before. And I've always kind of contended that version of the film, everybody's always talking about, oh, God, if that would have got released, it would have been a whole different game and it wouldn't have got shit on so much. But that version of the film, the producer's cut, to me was always much more, like, difficult to watch and follow and, like, much farther out there than just the theatrical cut. I don't think it would have done anything to help it.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess the theatrical version didn't do anything in the theaters. It was kind of a dead time for horror movies. But I don't think, yeah, I mean, I'm like you. I don't think the producer's cut would have done anything more. I mean, it's fun to look at and see at this point, but like there's just so much in it that is like, was just, I know that he was trying to make sense of what happened at the end of part five, and it does do that a little bit more in the producer's cut. But like the whole thing with Michael standing around with a bunch of people in cloaks and stuff, and it just doesn't work. And then the end of it, you remember the end of it, don't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I was still trying to figure out what is the ending of that anyway? Is Donald Pleasant stuck with the Curse of Thorn now, or what?
Here's the weird thing, like that movie was way ahead of its time in like trying to explain away shit that should never be explained. Like that became like a trend with all the remakes where they try like, okay, like here's the reason why everything is the way that it is. But that movie was way ahead of time in terms of trying to do that. And if you'll notice, all these series had some point in them where, for some reason, they just couldn't leave the series alone. Like they had to do some sort of like crazy gimmick, like origin. And it for Jason, it was Jason Goes to Hell, where he's now like some sort of eternal evil that can get into people's bodies and shit like that. For Freddy, it was like the Dream Child and the Freddy's Dead, which were both gimmicks, like movies. And this was the thing for Michael Myers. Like they started this in part 5 with the Thorn shit, and then I guess they were like, all right, we're going to go all in for whatever reason on this being like, yeah, this being the origin. And if the Halloween 2018 didn't show you anything, it's like you don't need any of that shit. They never needed to do any of that.
Well, I think with it probably ends with this movie, because after this movie they kind of start forgetting shit, with H2O, and then I think Resurrection was one of the movies where they just had they wanted to do some reality TV version of Blair Witch Michael Myers. So they didn't even have any sort of storyline aspect to it at all. That was probably the most throwaway movie of them all. But I mean, at the end of the day, this one, the producer's cut of part 6, is at least something different to watch. It's fun to watch every once in a while. But honestly, like I know I'm one of the few, but I kind of prefer the theatrical version over this one. And both versions I enjoy. I mean, I think that the visuals in this movie and the style of the movie is really, really good. And it's very similar to the original John Carpenter Halloween in that regard. And there's not too many. I don't think there's too many more after that had that.
I think it was probably like that movie, whatever version of it you're watching, is probably like the last, whatever you want to call it, like classic Halloween movie. I mean, you had Donald Pleasance was kind of in it, and you had like the typical setup and everything. It's the last one that actually really reminds me of like a Halloween movie in that way, like whatever that look is. Just like, part 8 is the last Jason movie that has that look.
Yeah, I think so too. Because after really part 6, because I think that they realized, because financially part 6 really didn't do that well, that they needed to really sink some big Hollywood money in the next one if they were going to make anything, and they did.